Skylanders Superchargers clearly did not sell very well. But why? Superchargers, like all Skylanders games, had an interesting problem. How do they sell toys and make a compelling game? The game has to sell the toys, but the toys also have to sell the game. Cool toys mean nothing if the game supporting them suffers, and this is where Superchargers fails. Superchargers' main gimmick was adding vehicles into the game. These vehicles created a new way to interact with the Skylander world, and the three classes, air, land, and sea, provided unique missions to embark on. 3 modes, so people buy 3 vehicle toys. It's genius. Until they immediately kneecapped it. You see, Skylanders tried to remain accessible despite being a game that inherently lives within a predatory monetization strategy. As such, the $75 starter packs contained everything you needed to beat the game. Giants created Tree Rex, a giant, which you could use to beat the game. Swap Force contained Blast Zone and Washbuckler, which were needed to beat the game. Trap Team featured the Trapmaster Snapshot, so you could beat the game. Superchargers is no different, as it contains Hot Streak, a vehicle that allows you to beat the game. Hot Streak is a land vehicle. This inherently harms the structure of the game and the vehicles themselves. Air and sea vehicles are not required to beat the game, so they need to be added as a sideshow to the actual levels. The developers created a solution: individual air and sea challenges. These are separate areas that would be loaded in as a separate minigame or mission, tangentially related to the level's themes and ideas. Super exciting, right? In previous games, you could argue that the equivalent to these areas would be the elemental gates, but elemental gates were actually features within the level. You could see the area from different parts of the levels, and in some cases those areas would teleport you around the level, making everything feel cohesive. In Superchargers, these areas are self-contained and loaded separately from the rest of the level. The only missions that I remember impacting the level were missions to defeat a boss before the usual fight. If defeated, the boss would disappear from the map. That's cool, but the level of immersion is greatly reduced. The only level where this concept really works was the library. In that level, each part of the level was contained in different books/stories. This allowed each vehicle to feel unique and made sense, as each book was telling a different story. However, you can't make a game out of 16 library levels, so the rest of the levels just have to suffer with underwhelming side vehicle sections that are only there to justify toy creation and put full game completion behind a bigger paywall. By the way, let's talk about that paywall, because that's this kind of part of the problem contained within the game. Seriously, let's take a look at the prices to 100% complete each of the games. For Spyro's Adventure, the starter pack was $70, the extra Skylanders for each element would be $50, and $100 for the extra level packs. That adds up to $180. Giants requires just a starting pack, if you already have that, so add $75 to the total. Swap Force has the $75 starter pack. There are also new dual elemental gates, so while playing solo, that requires all the swappers, so add $90 to the pile. And we have level packs for $50 more. Trap Team is where it really gets bad. We have the $75 starter pack, $100 for each of the elemental traps, and $105 for the remaining trap masters. Now, Superchargers throws another $105 onto that pile. Awesome! To complete all the games, you only have to pay $895! I wonder why game sales started to decrease. But what if you just have a land vehicle? This type of vehicle is included within the starter pack, which means it can be incorporated within the game's levels. Surely these vehicles are implemented well in fun and unique ways, right? Right? Let's evaluate the use of vehicles by the concept of bookending. Bookending is the idea that you can evaluate a work of art, whether a movie, piece of literature, or a game, by its beginning and ending. Obviously, vehicles are the main gimmick, so they feature in the beginning and the end. So let's take a look at the beginning and ending of the game. How do they hook the player in? How do they end the game in a thrilling conclusion? How are vehicles implemented to enhance these elements? Yep, game begins and ends in a tunnel. Just a nice purple cylinder. It's the main problem with the vehicle sections. They're just lines. So much of this game devolves into a terrible auto-scroller. Skylanders is an adventure game, and all of a sudden large swaths of the game and each level actively constrains exploration and player agency. This extends to boss fights. There are multiple boss fights that end up just being a linear obstacle course instead of an actual fight, including the final boss. The worst part is that linear boss fights can be done effectively. And Bowser's Fury, the plussy parts of fighting Fury Bowser follow the same concept. There's a set path to catch Bowser, and the path must be followed to attack him. However, these fights have a couple of advantages over the Skylanders fights. What's the difference? Presentation! The fights take place over an entire archipelago, and Bowser's attacks dynamically affect the archipelago, and that leads to a much more engaging fight. Also, there's the illusion of freedom that Superchargers never gives. You could ride Plessy anywhere during these fights. You won't accomplish much. But the lack of invisible barriers, that presentation of freedom, makes the fight feel way more dynamic than it actually really is. Not every vehicle fight or section is entirely linear, and occasionally they open up into larger areas, but these aren't much better. Please note that the following complaints can probably be summed up as skill issues, but let me try to explain. Firstly, these open areas are only meant to be arenas to fight enemies, not actual places to explore. These lead to these areas feel generic, as they have a similar design or layout each time, and they accommodate a similar objective. This feels like a massive wasted opportunity. In order to beat the game, you need a vehicle. So why not have an entire vehicle-based level where you can drive around and fulfill objectives? Just lean into the vehicles! Unfortunately they did, but only once. The Demolition Derby level is really the only example of this. How can you make vehicle combat in these large arenas better? By leaning into it! The Demolition Derby allowed for the creation of 3 vehicle bosses, all designed to fit the Demolition Derby aesthetic. The Demolition Derby also provides a story reason for why the Skylanders fighting with a vehicle within an arena. And everything fits together. This fight is still technically as shoehorned in as all the others, but by providing a story and setting that fits the vehicles, it's able to prove its worth. Seriously, the Demolition Derby in Skylanders is such a clever way to include a vehicle boss rush. It's awesome. Well done to the dev team on that one. As for all the other levels, they just feel like normal Skylanders levels, stitched together by vehicle sections to justify their inclusion. This is what bugs me. Skylanders has had vehicle sections before. Think of all the turret sections, or even the Archean Copter level from Giants. That's just a whole flying vehicle level. They're also my least favorite parts of these games. In the vehicle, you aren't playing the Skylander, you're playing a vehicle. Fortunately, when playing in a vehicle, the vehicle's traits and personality trump the Skylanders' traits and personality, and that just feels wrong. The series is called Skylanders, so that Skylanders should remain the focus. Superchargers just gets that wrong. This game just reeks of desperation. Trap Team had declining sales, and Activision pushed the gimmicks and figures up to 11 for that release. With Superchargers, they were desperate to come up with a gimmick, so they came up with an easy solution. Vehicles make an easy toy idea, was a complete shift from just a figure but more overpowered, and the development team had the experience with vehicle combat before. This desperation slipped into the second gimmick, the Superchargers. Half of these Superchargers are just refreshes of previous Skylanders. Activision was relying on nostalgia for characters that were 4 years old. Did people really need an 8th Gilgrunt figure? The easy, desperate solution does not necessarily translate to a good one. In summary, Skylanders Superchargers is a Skylanders game. It features fun, fluid combat, unique level themes and designs, but everything is anchored down by a vehicle component that hinders level structure, boss and enemy encounters, and preemptively handicapped its own effectiveness. Would I still recommend the game, despite its flaws? Absolutely! After all, I did buy a Wii U and a bunch of old Skylanders to play the game. Activision was right about nostalgia. They just had to wait a while.
Hail to the whale!